Whether it's a new pair of pants or a pair of pants that you want to make into joggers with a cuff, I've got you covered. I'm Howell, welcome back to my channel. In today's sewing tutorial, I'm going to show you how easy it is to add a knit cuff to a pair of pants and how you can add a cuff to a sleeve. Let's get started. You can do this with woven fabrics and with knit fabrics. I'm going to demonstrate today on how to add a knit cuff to woven fabrics and also on a knit sleeve. The only things that you'll need for this project is, of course, your pants or your shirt that you're adding a cuff to, a pair of fabric scissors, a few pins, and knit ribbing. I want to chat with you just for a minute about knit ribbing and what you can use as a cuff. You can buy knit ribbing by the yard in your fabric store, and they're going to come in all different weights and stretchiness. And you can even use upcycled fabric. This is a cute sweater that has a lot of stretch to it. I've used this for several cuffs on slippers and mittens and things. See how stretchy that is? And it's a cute color. So I've used that a lot. You can use clothing that has a lot of lycra and stretch to it for a cuff. This is a t-shirt that I've used for cuffs. It does have a lot of stretch to it. You want to make sure that it has at least 30% stretch or it won't work. You wouldn't want to put a real bulky, heavyweight ribbing on, say, a lightweight t-shirt like this for a child. The sleeves don't really have to have a ton of stretch, but if you're using a cuff on the bottom of pants where you have to get your foot into it, you want it to stretch. And you can also use an upcycled cuff from a pre-existing t-shirt, sweatshirt, or something else that has a cuff on it. You can cut that off and use it on a new item. So here I have a pair of flannel pajama pants, and if you haven't seen my tutorial on how to make a pair of flannel pajama pants, you might want to check that out. This is a pair of Old Navy flannel pajama pants that I'm going to alter, cut it off, and add a cuff to it. The guy that I'm giving these to has shorter legs, and so we're going to cut some of this off, and we're also going to taper down maybe the width of the bottom of the leg. His inseam is 23.5 inches, so I'm going to measure from the crotch seam down 23 inches, and that's how long his inseam is. Joggers are kind of cute with a little bit of bagginess to the bottom, so I'm going to add a couple inches. He's a teenager and he may most likely grow, so I'm going to add a couple inches onto that and just put a pin in there. I'm going to cut these down even though this has been hemmed, and let's say that you wanted to just take this pair of pajama pants and add a cuff to it. Since the cuff is going to be about 3 inches, I would just cut off this hem and then sew the cuff onto that. But where this is going to need to be shorter, I'm going to cut that off, and I'm going to do it really simply by just lining up the bottoms, taking my rotary cutter, and I can cut that off. You'll want to take in the seam either on one side or both sides depending on how big it is. I find that on an adult size you don't want the starting width of the bottom of the pants to be much bigger than 8 inches. Let's see where we are here. So that's just 8¼ inches. I think we'll be fine. The first thing that you'll do is measure the bottom of the pant, and if it's too wide, let's go over that first. I've turned the pants inside out, and I'm going to take, I've already decided, I'm going to keep the full length, and I'm going to cut off the bottom hem. I'm going to line that up, make sure the fabric's flat, and just to make it easy and so we don't have to unpick anything, I'm going to go right against the edge of the hem and cut that off. I would do the same for the other side, but I want to take this down maybe 1 inch so it's not so wide to start with. So I would go to my sewing machine or my serger, start halfway up the pant leg and sewing right the same stitching, and then I'm going to just taper that so that I end up with a 1/2 inch on each side. So you can just take your measuring tape, measure a 1/2 inch, and using a pen or a pencil or a chalk and just mark that so I know where to end up. So I'm just barely gradually tapering that in and off. Now you can use a regular straight stitch on a sewing machine if you want to, but if you have a serger, this makes it so much nicer because you don't have to finish off the seams. And I have a tutorial showing you, if you only have a sewing machine, how to finish off and get that finished edge with a regular sewing machine. I'm going to come up about halfway, lift up my presser foot, slide the fabric underneath, and start sewing and just angling gradually off and to that 1/2 inch point. See how I'm barely just taking any off right now, and then I'll make that gradually bigger. I'm going to flip it over and do the same to the other side. You do the same thing for the other pant leg. Now for the measurement of the cuffs, and the height of the cuff is 6 inches, so you'll need to cut a strip 6 inches. You'll want to measure the bottom of the pants. This is 8 inches. This is folded in half, and the stretch is going this way. And you'll want the cuff to measure no more than, well, about 2.5 inches smaller than the actual pant cuff. The reason I do that is because it's so much easier to measure this opening and not have to double it and then figure out. I just like to fold my cuff in half. Knit fabric comes in a tube anyway, so just get on the fold and cut out the width that you need. So I have cut out 2. I'm going to place the right sides together. I'm going to take it to my sewing machine or my serger and sew a 3/8 inch seam allowance just down that end on both cuffs. Take your cuff and fold it in half with wrong sides together, lining up that seam that you just sewed. And I'm going to fold that in half and mark that halfway point with a pin. Take the pajama pants and open it up. The right side of the pajama pants are facing out. I'm going to find the inner seam of the pant and line up that seam with the seam on the cuff. And then that halfway point, I'll line up with the other side seam. Now you can see that the cuff is a lot smaller than the pant leg. No worries. Take it to the sewing machine or the serger and start sewing right there at that seam. I'm going to stretch it. See that? As I sew. Place the ribbing down. Take out my pin, of course. Lift up my presser foot. Slide my fabric in there so it's against the edge. I'll take a few stitches and then I'll readjust and try to keep those edges together. So I'll find that halfway point about and hold it. And when you get to the beginning where you started, just sew so it's even, and then angle off real quick. So that wasn't hard, was it? Now I have a pair of flannel jogger pants with a cuff. Now let's go over how to put a cuff on a long sleeve t-shirt. In a previous tutorial where I showed you how to make a pair of pajama pants, and another tutorial where I showed you how to use Wonder Under to applique this cute dog on this t-shirt. Look how cute it turned out. So this long sleeve t-shirt doesn't have a cuff, it's just been hemmed. So it has a pretty narrow base as already. On a shirt like this, where you don't want a lot of gathers, I just kind of want a cuff there. I don't want to have it gather up and pucker like you would like a blouse or something. Now, no worrying if I cut this off that it's going to be, the shirt's going to be too short, because we're adding that cuff onto the bottom. So I'll cut that bottom hem off, and I'm just going to cut right at the edge and do that on both sleeves. Now I find the length for a child's cuff, when it's folded, that's about the right size. So this is about 4 inches for a cuff, and an adult I would probably do 5 inches, or you've seen sweatshirts that have long cuff, really long cuffs, so it's up to you how long you want that. But as far as the width goes, when you're sewing a cuff onto a pre-existing sleeve, I only want the sleeve to be a 1/2 inch bigger than the ribbing on the cuff. Like I say, you don't want a lot of puckering. Another way to do it is to open up on a new shirt that you're making. We'll do that on another tutorial, but you would open that up, fold this in half, place the edges together and sew across. You'd slightly stretch that, and then you would open that up, fold the right sides together, and then sew your sleeve seam. So that's another way to put a cuff on a shirt that you're making and not a pre-existing shirt. So what we're going to do is the same thing as we did on the cuff of the pants, is just fold the right sides together. This is the stretch, and sew down that seam there on both cuffs. I'll get both of those ready and take it to the serger. Now what if you were using a regular sewing machine? You would just stitch a straight stitch using a 3/8 inch seam allowance, and then a zigzag stitch. Then you'd go back over the edges with a zigzag stitch. This isn't going to be stretched this way, so there's no need to use the lightning bolt stitch on the seam. I'm going to fold those wrong sides together again, just like we did the cuff on the pants. Find the halfway point. And this is so small, sometimes I don't even find that halfway point. It's so small. Put the cuff over the top with the seam matching the seam of the sleeve. You want to make sure your raw edges are even, or you may not catch all the layers. There's 3 layers we're sewing through. So I forgot to find the halfway point of the sleeve. So I can do that now. Take it to the sewing machine, and you're sewing in a small space, but you'll just sew a little bit, stretch, sew a little bit, and stretch. Take my fingers in there, make sure my edges are lined up. Take a few stitches, and then I'm going to realign everything, make sure the edges are even. See how that's tucked underneath? That wouldn't be good because we wouldn't catch that sleeve. So I pull it, those edges come together. That t-shirt fabric's wanting to curl. And I'm just barely taking a little bit off with my knife of the serger. So I wanted to show you how you would do this on a regular sewing machine. Just placing my presser foot on the inside, stretch it so the edges are all even. I'm going to make one pass around with a straight stitch. Now I'm going to change my sewing machine stitch to a zigzag stitch, and the stitch is 4 wide and 3 in length. So what you want the stitch is to be just on the inside of that seam, but you don't want it going over the seam. So can you see what that looks like? I have my regular seam and then my zigzag stitch right there. And then flip that cuff out. So that gives a little bit more coziness to that shirt. A finished edge so it's not riding up their arms. Pretty simple. So that's all there is to it. Made a pair of joggers out of my pajama pants with these knit cuffs, and I've added a cozy cuff to my long sleeve shirt. If you like this tutorial and found it helpful, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Stay tuned for upcoming tutorials. Have fun sewing, and we'll see you next time.